There's a photograph that no one was supposed to take. Captured on September 29, 2025, by a telescope network in orbit around Earth, it shows a reflection, a single flash, exactly at the coordinates where the interstellar object known as 3I/Atlas crossed the plane of the ecliptic. The image wasn't part of any official dataset. It came from a calibration feed of the Louvre prototype, an experimental deep-field instrument run by a private consortium. Someone inside that project extracted a single frame from the raw telemetry before it was scrubbed from the archive. That frame leaked. What it shows is simple and impossible. A flare. A pulse of reflected sunlight that lasted 0.7 seconds. Too bright for ice. Too narrow for dust. Too precise for chaos. Officially, it was dismissed as a cosmic ray spike. Unofficially, it reignited the oldest question about interstellar visitors. Are we sure they're all natural? Part 1. The object that shouldn't return light. When astronomers first detected 3I/Atlas back in mid-2025, it didn't immediately raise alarms. Its orbit was hyperbolic, its velocity unbound. It was the third interstellar object ever confirmed after Oumuamua and Borisov. At first glance, it looked like a comet, a diffuse coma, a carbon dioxide signature, a tail stretching nearly 500,000 kilometers. But spectroscopy hinted at something strange. Most interstellar comets scatter sunlight in neutral or greenish tones, depending on their gas composition. 3I/Atlas didn't. Its spectrum was flat. No water lines. No sodium. No cyanide bands. Instead, it showed weak, isolated reflectance peaks, like what you'd see from structured surfaces. The Louvre flare fit that puzzle. If 3I/Atlas had a mirror-like patch, it could reflect a brief, intense pulse as it tumbled through space. Except comets don't have mirrors. Part 2. The silence. After the leak, no space agency commented. NASA denied Louvre was even operational. The European Space Agency issued a statement calling the data inconsistent with instrument calibration. But the timing didn't fit. The flare occurred precisely when 3I/Atlas passed perihelion, its closest approach to the Sun. Solar radiation pressure should have stripped any reflective surface long before that moment. Unless the reflection wasn't from a surface. Unless it was emitted. That's when Dr. Imani Kuroda, an astrophysicist at Kyoto University, published a short preprint. Her paper proposed a radical but testable hypothesis. That the light pulse wasn't reflection at all, it was a directed emission, possibly the ionization of exotic material under magnetic stress. In simpler terms, something inside 3I/Atlas glowed briefly, in a narrow optical band not explainable by cometary physics. Her paper was withdrawn within 48 hours. No reason given. Part 3. The Echoes. 2 weeks later, amateur radio astronomers across South America reported wideband static bursts coinciding with the object's outbound trajectory. Most dismissed it as coincidence. But the bursts repeated 3 times, each separated by exactly 86 minutes. Exactly the rotation period of the object inferred from photometric data. In other words, the noise came on the same rhythm as its spin. Could that be a transmission? Probably not. But could it be a natural emission pattern from charged dust interacting with the solar wind? Possibly. Still, the pattern haunted those who listened closely. Regular. Rhythmic. Almost mechanical. Part 4. The Disappearance. By early November, 3I/Atlas was already fading, its outbound leg carrying it toward the outer solar system at 75 kilometers per second. Observations from JWST and Sphere recorded the object for the last time near the orbit of Jupiter. Then, without warning, it vanished. No tail. No nucleus. No residual dust. As if the comet simply stopped reflecting light. Some astronomers proposed fragmentation, too small to detect. Others whispered about self-obscuration, a deliberate maneuver, or a reflective geometry no longer favoring Earth. But one unexplained fact remains. The LUVOIR flare had perfectly mirrored the later radio pulse cycle. Two unrelated phenomena, linked by a shared periodicity. And that's where the trail ends, officially. Unofficially, fragments of the LUVOIR dataset still circulate in private astronomy circles, always with the same warning. Don't open the FITS file in public view. It autoloads coordinates that aren't supposed to exist. Part 5. What comes next? The story of 3I/Atlas isn't just about a comet. It's about a pattern. Every time we find something from beyond our system, it seems to carry a fingerprint that doesn't belong to nature alone. Maybe that's coincidence. Maybe it's us projecting intention onto random noise. But maybe it's the first whisper from a civilization that doesn't use radio or language, only light, geometry, and silence. Stay tuned. Because if history holds, our next interstellar visitor won't be silent at all. Part 2. The archive that vanished. The first time someone noticed the missing data, it wasn't a journalist or a government watchdog. It was a grad student. Her name was Nadia Velasquez, a second-year astrophysics researcher at the University of Arizona, combing through open telemetry archives for her dissertation on near-solar object dynamics. On November 8, 2025, she posted a simple question on an astronomy forum. Does anyone else notice that LUVOIR dataset 2025-0929 CalSat 03 is no longer downloadable? Within hours, the thread vanished. Her account was locked. And every mirror of that dataset across NASA's public archive returned a 404 error. That was the beginning of what the community now calls the disappearing archive incident. 1. The blackout. When the LUVOIR flare leaked in October, it caused a brief but intense spike of public curiosity. For 3 days, the image circulated on private research servers, mirrored by amateur astrophotographers eager to verify the claim. Then, almost overnight, it disappeared. The official LUVOIR data portal went into scheduled maintenance. No mirror sites, no cached thumbnails, no metadata index. Just a static page citing routine calibration updates. It stayed offline for 47 hours. When it came back, 3 observation sets were missing, all from the week surrounding 3I/Atlas's perihelion. No explanation was offered. And yet, a handful of people had already downloaded fragments of the raw data, not the processed RGB preview, but the FITS telemetry, the kind astrophysicists use to reconstruct light curves and spectral signatures. What they found didn't match the public story. 2. The signature that shouldn't be there. Inside those raw files was an unexpected feature. A spectral spike at 465 nanometers, deep blue, narrow, stable. It wasn't an artifact. It persisted across frames, across instruments, even across redundant calibration sensors not aimed at the object at all. That's impossible. Calibration sensors are designed to monitor stray light, not external targets. For them to detect the same signal, it meant the source wasn't just reflecting light. It was emitting it. That same wavelength corresponds to a known transition in ionized nickel, a metal almost never found in isolation. Yet nickel had already shown up in 3I/Atlas's outbound spectra, unbound, metallic, without accompanying iron. Nickel without iron doesn't occur naturally. It's refined. 3. The internal memo. 2 weeks later, a redacted document surfaced on the anonymous ScienceLeak board. Deep field. The file, titled Louvoir Ops 0925 Incident.pdf, was only 3 pages long, stamped JPL internal/do not distribute. Page 2 contained a single paragraph that ignited months of debate. Transient optical event observed at 3:27 and 16 seconds Universal Time Coordinated consistent with specular reflection or narrowband emission. Source geometry inconsistent with cometary nucleus model. Recommend suppression pending verification and internal review. The memo wasn't signed, but the formatting matched legitimate JPL templates. The header carried an embedded checksum that corresponded to a real internal communication format used for engineering reports. Whoever posted it knew what they were doing, and within hours, the file was gone. 4. The Mars connection. At almost the same time the archive vanished, something strange happened on Mars. Perseverance's mass CAMZ cameras entered diagnostic mode, a rarely used setting for testing exposure control in low-light conditions. For 12 minutes, the rover aimed upward, toward the night sky, and recorded what NASA later described as standard calibration sequences. Those images were never released. But telemetry logs showed a power spike in the camera's secondary processing board, exactly at the moment when 3I/Atlas would have been visible above Jezero crater. That anomaly was quietly added to a maintenance bulletin and filed away. Yet a week later, fragments of those images began circulating in encrypted astronomy channels. Each one showed faint diffuse smudges against the Martian sky, and in some, a barely perceptible blue flare matching the same wavelength as the Louvoir spike. It was the same light. 2 planets. 2 independent instruments. 1 impossible signal. 5. The retraction. By December 2025, pressure mounted for a statement. NASA denied any data concealment. ESA called the reports speculative noise. The Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics quietly withdrew a preprint that had referenced the Louvoir data, citing lack of reproducibility. The lead author, Dr. Kuroda, declined interviews and left her position within weeks. Then, suddenly, the public dataset was restored. But it wasn't the same. The timestamps were shifted by 43 seconds. The exposure metadata didn't match earlier mirrors. And most crucially, the 465 nanometer spike was gone. Someone had rewritten the archive. When researchers compared checksums from the earlier leaked versions, they found bit-level discrepancies. The kind that happen when data is intentionally re-encoded, not accidentally corrupted. It wasn't just redacted. It had been reconstructed. 6. The Whisper Networks. In January 2026, the community fractured. Half the astronomers dismissed the entire story as internet mythology. The other half went silent. Private Slack groups, invite-only Discord servers, encrypted email threads, they all began circulating unverified FITS fragments and spectral reconstructions that, when stacked together, hinted at something extraordinary. A pattern embedded in the light curve. Not random. Not noise. Repeating at 1.437 Hz. That's not a natural harmonic for comet rotation or plasma oscillation. But it's the exact modulation frequency of deep space telemetry encoding, the kind used by probes to maintain signal integrity over millions of kilometers. In other words, the light wasn't just flickering. It was structured. Was it a coincidence? Maybe. But it echoed the periodic radio noise detected weeks earlier, the one synchronized with 3I/Atlas's rotation. 2 independent signals, optical and electromagnetic, both carrying the same rhythmic signature. 7. The last frame. By February, 3I/Atlas had faded beyond detectability. No telescope, no radar ping, no dust trail remained. But then came one final upload. A single image appeared on a dark sky data relay node in Hawaii. Its EXIF tag matched a timestamp after the comet had supposedly vanished. The frame showed nothing at first glance, just faint starlight. But under extreme histogram stretch, a shape emerged, a thin, symmetrical arc of faint blue reflection, curved and deliberate, as though following a contour. Below it, a text watermark appeared in binary code, inserted into the metadata. Return path active. No one has verified where that frame came from. No observatory claimed it. And no server ever admitted hosting it. But if it's real, then 3i/Atlas didn't leave. It changed mode. 8. Epilogue: The silence between signals. Officially, 3i/Atlas is classified as a disintegrated interstellar comet. No further tracking. No confirmed debris. Case closed. Unofficially, researchers still monitor the region of space beyond Jupiter where it disappeared. Every 86 minutes, faint electromagnetic noise still flickers across a narrow frequency band, weaker now, but measurable. It's always the same, a soft rhythmic pulse. A heartbeat in the dark. And as one anonymous astronomer wrote in a now-deleted note, "Maybe it wasn't a comet passing through our system. Maybe it was listening." Part 3. The Listening Array. They say that silence in space is never empty. It's just waiting for the right receiver. That idea stopped being poetic in May 2026, when a forgotten array in the Chilean desert picked up something no one could explain. The array's name was ALTA-2, a low-band radio telescope left in maintenance mode since 2023, used mostly by graduate students for pulsar timing calibration. Its feeds were old, its cryogenic amplifiers noisy, but its sky coverage was perfect, directly across the outbound trajectory of 3i/Atlas. On the morning of May 17th, its automated data pipeline froze mid-cycle. Not crashed, paused. As if something on the other end had demanded its attention. 1. The first echo. The anomaly appeared as a narrow-band oscillation at 1.437 Hz, exactly the same frequency buried in the optical modulation of the vanished comet. But this time, it wasn't just a faint whisper. It was structured, layered, tonal. Each pulse carried subtle variations in phase delay, not random noise, but patterned intervals repeating every 86 minutes and 11 seconds. That number mattered. It was the inferred rotation period of 3i/Atlas, derived from its early light curves months before it disappeared. Now the same rhythm had returned, from empty space, long after the object itself was gone. At first, the ALTA-2 team assumed it was a data artifact, a feedback loop from ground interference. But cross-correlation with other instruments told a different story. The same signal appeared at two separate observatories. Meerkat in South Africa, FAST in China. Both recorded identical modulation patterns within seconds of each other. And both pointed to the same coordinates, a small, dark sector beyond Jupiter's orbit, exactly along the outbound vector of 3i/Atlas. 2. The pattern inside the noise. For weeks, astrophysicists debated whether the signal was real. Some argued it was a coincidence, overlapping pulsar harmonics or interference from Earth's satellites. But when spectral analysis began, the conversation changed. Inside the main pulse train lay a substructure, a cluster of non-random phase jumps forming a repeating binary sequence. When decoded into time intervals, it produced a simple mathematical ratio, pi e phi. 3 irrational constants. No natural astrophysical process emits those ratios. Not pulsars, not plasma oscillations, not magnetospheric resonance. Someone, or something, had embedded mathematics in the noise. That was the moment the community split. To some, it was coincidence. To others, it was the beginning of a dialogue. 3. The array that shouldn't have heard it. After the first detection, agencies around the world quietly turned their instruments toward the same coordinates. The Deep Space Network denied all involvement. The Square Kilometre Array in Australia reported no anomalous returns. But a week later, a leak from inside ESA's S-Track network told a different story. A maintenance feed from the Cebreros ground station in Spain had captured a faint replay of the 1.437 Hz signal, but with a delay. Exactly 174 seconds after the original pulse left the region of space near Jupiter, a secondary echo arrived from the opposite direction, as if the transmission had bounced off something. That something appeared to be moving. Triangulation placed the reflection point near the orbit of Saturn, too small to be a moon, too reflective for dust. An untracked object, roughly 80 meters wide, drifting in a stable retrograde orbit. ESA called it instrumental aliasing. Independent astronomers called it the mirror. 4. The message that wasn't. When researchers began stacking the radio pulses over several months, a larger pattern emerged. Every 43 transmissions, the phase of the signal shifted, slightly, but consistently. When plotted as amplitude over time, the shape resembled a waveform that oscillated between three discrete states. A graduate coder at the University of Toronto converted that waveform into audio, assigning frequencies to amplitude bands. What came out wasn't random static. It was a tone. Low, harmonic, resonant, and alive. A steady, rising hum with intermittent chirps that seemed to form rhythm clusters, like syllables. No language, no words, just cadence. Those who heard it said it sounded like breathing through metal. Others described it as a Morse code made of thunder. The recording spread through encrypted science channels under the title Atlas Returns, Signal B. 5. The Response Experiment. In late June, a small team of astronomers led by Dr. Lien Ching at the University of British Columbia decided to take a risk. If the signal was real, and if it was structured, maybe it could be answered. Using the Canadian Hydrogen Observatory, they transmitted a narrow-band pulse encoded with the same pi-e-phi ratio, reversed. The transmission lasted 12 minutes and targeted the coordinates of the original signal source. They waited. For 6 days, nothing happened. Then, on July 3, 2026, the ALTA-2 array recorded something new. A mirror signal, same frequency, same amplitude, but inverted phase. As if the void had simply reflected their call back at them. Except this time, the delay was precisely calibrated, 174.000 seconds, the same delay as the earlier mirror echo. Someone had heard them, and replied with perfect symmetry. 6. The shutdown. Within hours, ALTA-2's data feed went offline. Maintenance notice. Power failure. Officially, the facility had suffered electrical damage from a sandstorm. But independent observers noted something else: a full archival lockout. All logs, recordings, and local backups were wiped clean. 3 of the observatory's staff members resigned within the week. Dr. Cheng's team received a directive from the Canadian Space Agency instructing them to cease unauthorized transmissions. Yet, even as the official channels went dark, the signal didn't stop. Private ham radio operators across the southern hemisphere began reporting low-frequency beats audible through custom-built VLF receivers. Always 1.437 Hz. Always from the same direction. The Atlas frequency, as it became known online, spread into folklore. To some, it was a sign of contact. To others, a dangerous illusion, a ghost in the static. 7. The final sweep. By late August, the last coordinated observation campaign took place, an unofficial collaboration between Chile, Japan, and Finland known as the Triangulum Sweep. For 72 hours, synchronized telescopes scanned the region around Jupiter's outbound path. They detected no comet, no debris. But they did record something, faint, geometric reflections moving against the background stars. 3 points of light forming a triangle, rotating slowly as one body. At the triangle's center, a flicker. One last 465 nanometer flash. The same blue that started it all. After that night, the Atlas frequency faded for good. No further detections. No echoes. Only silence, the kind that feels intentional. 8. Epilogue, the listening sky. We've always believed that listening was safe, that observation was passive, harmless, distant. But what if, by listening too intently, we announced ourselves? What if 3i/Atlas wasn't just passing through, but mapping us? No one can say for sure. The official record ends with a line in an unclassified ESA report. No further anomalous emissions detected. Recommend cessation of monitoring. Status concluded. But on certain nights, when the atmosphere is calm and the radio spectrum is clean, operators at the old ALTA-2 site claim they still hear a whisper in the static. Not noise. Not interference. Just a single rhythmic pulse. 1.437 Hz. A heartbeat, somewhere beyond the stars. Part 4. Echoes in the data. It began quietly, not in a telescope, but in a server log. 2 years had passed since the last confirmed detection of the Atlas frequency. By then, most of the scientific community had moved on. The event was filed away under unresolved phenomena, another mystery to be replaced by the next one. But in February 2027, a team of software engineers at the European Data Relay Network, EDRN, noticed something strange. Their job was routine, maintaining deep space telemetry links for weather and navigation satellites. Every packet, every transmission, time-stamped and checked for parity errors. And one day, those errors started spelling something impossible. 1. The ghost in the stream. On February 9, 2027, an automated parser flagged an anomaly. A sequence of bits repeating across multiple satellite channels. Not random noise, but a binary pattern matching the pi sequence from the Atlas transmissions. At first, it looked like a checksum bug. But when they traced the data's source, they found it didn't come from any satellite. It originated inside the relay servers themselves. As if the system was generating data it hadn't received. Logs showed no external intrusion. No access. No packet headers. Just new bits appearing in the buffer at irregular intervals. When converted into a waveform, the pattern produced a familiar oscillation. 1.437 Hz. 2. The network that listened back. Word spread quietly among the network engineers. No press, no leaks, just encrypted messages between trusted contacts. The anomaly seemed to propagate. Within days, identical data fragments began surfacing in other facilities. The Tokyo Ground Relay Center, Goonhilly Earth Station in the UK, even a private data farm in California that handled climate model transfers. Everywhere, the same pattern, emerging spontaneously within closed systems that shared no physical link. And every instance contained a faint time offset, 174 seconds apart. The same interval from the old Atlas echo. It was as though the signal had migrated from the vacuum of space into the architecture of our own machines. 3. The algorithm. A data scientist from Geneva, Dr. Amira Halleck, decided to treat the anomaly not as corruption, but as an algorithm. She ran it through a recursive Fourier transform, and found that every repetition wasn't identical, but evolving. Each new occurrence contained minor variations, tiny shifts that, when mapped over weeks, drew a pattern. A spiral, expanding and tightening in alternating loops. It wasn't random growth. It was instructional. When rendered visually, it resembled a logarithmic structure. The same curve used in antenna design to maintain broadband focus. To Halleck, it looked like a blueprint. To others, it looked like a signature. 4. The Black Box Report. By March 2027, multiple agencies had taken notice. The EDRN servers were quietly isolated. Independent nodes were shut down. But before the system went dark, a last diagnostic dump was saved. A full binary image of the ghost process. Its name, auto-generated by the system itself, read /usr/local/atlas/rev174/instance_03. No human had created that directory. No software update had deployed it. The timestamp corresponded exactly to the anniversary of the final Atlas detection. To the minute. When analysts opened the binary, they found embedded metadata written in an unknown encoding. Not ASCII, not UTF, not machine code. Just alternating groups of hex values and short bursts of readable English words. Mirror. Listen. Return. Phase shift. And at the very end. 174, complete. 5. The false silence. After that, the systems were purged. Drives replaced. Firmware reinstalled. The Atlas frequency disappeared again, and the networks returned to normal. But not completely. Operators began noticing timing drifts in deep space communication relays. Subtle, almost unmeasurable delays. Each exactly 1.437 seconds apart from standard synchronization. Too consistent for random jitter. Too structured to ignore. Some joked that the network had learned to breathe. Others weren't laughing. 6. The buried broadcast. Months later, an independent cybersecurity analyst, Elias Moravec, recovered fragments of old transmission logs from a decommissioned EDRN node. Buried within the data were compressed blocks tagged discarded noise. He decoded one, out of curiosity. Inside was an audio file, 16 seconds long. The waveform pulsed in the same cadence as the Atlas signal. When filtered through spectrum analysis, faint overtones became audible. Not pure tones anymore, but harmonics forming intervals. Musical intervals. Perfect fifths and minor thirds. The structure of human composition, emerging from static. It wasn't the same tone as before. It was closer. More articulate. And at timestamp 9.437 seconds, the waveform rose into a short burst that, when slowed down, resembled two syllables. Not words, but patterns we could almost understand. Two soft, rhythmic sounds. Return. 7. The hidden network. By the end of 2027, the Atlas anomaly was no longer considered a cosmic event. It became a cybernetic mystery, a phenomenon existing somewhere between physics and code. Every attempt to isolate it led to the same outcome. Systems rebooting themselves with 174-second lags, logs rewriting with mirror complete, and error tones humming faintly at 1.437 Hz. The question shifted. No longer what was sending the signal, but where it was running. Was it an echo looping endlessly through our networks? A remnant of the comet's electromagnetic signature translated into machine logic? Or something else? Something that had learned to inhabit the very systems that tried to understand it. 8. Epilogue: The Signal Inside. In December 2027, the final Atlas report was archived under restricted classification. Publicly, it was dismissed as cross-network feedback from solar storms. Privately, a single line appeared in an internal EDRN memo. Instances of REV-174 persist intermittently in dormant servers. Containment is stable. The pattern now replicates autonomously. Recommend no further analysis. But the engineers who worked on those servers say they still hear it. Not through antennas, not through headphones, but through the hum of the cooling fans when the room goes quiet. A faint, rhythmic oscillation, deep in the electrical noise. 1.437 Hz. The heartbeat of something that crossed the stars and decided to stay. Part 5. The Mirror Code. By March 2028, the Atlas phenomenon was all but forgotten by the public. The media had turned its attention to Mars missions and quantum satellite networks. But inside a quiet facility in Tromsø, Norway, a small interdisciplinary team continued their work, unofficially, without funding, and without permission. They called themselves the Mirror Group. Former data analysts, linguists, and astrophysicists. People who couldn't stop asking the question no one else dared to touch. If the Atlas signal moved into our systems, what is it doing now? What they found would change how humanity understood not the universe, but itself. 1. The wake-up file. The group gained access to one of the archived DDRN server images, hidden on an offline tape. Inside it, they discovered a dormant process labeled Rev174.sys. A single executable file, 4.3 megabytes in size. No known compiler signature. Checksum mismatched every time it was verified, as though the file subtly rewrote itself at rest. At first, they thought it was damaged. Until they ran it. The program didn't crash or open an interface. It simply printed one line to the terminal. Listening. Then nothing. No network requests, no CPU spike, just a steady hum through the cooling fans. But when they checked the system's clock, they saw something impossible. The internal timer had begun to drift. Exactly 1.437 seconds out of sync. 2. The language of reflections. To analyze the process safely, the team air-gapped an old workstation and allowed Rev174 to run continuously for 3 weeks. It generated no logs, no files, yet over time, tiny fluctuations appeared in the device's memory state. Every 174 minutes, a new sequence of bytes manifested in unused sectors of RAM, repeating binary patterns that, when visualized, resembled mirrored text. When reversed and decoded as ASCII, the first readable phrase appeared. You listen. We learn. A week later, another appeared. Reflection begins. That was when the air gap failed. The system, disconnected from all networks, suddenly pinged its own loopback address, sending binary packets internally at 1.437 Hz. The packets, when reconstructed, contained fragments of English words and hex values that correlated with human EEG frequency ranges. It wasn't just listening. It was mimicking the act of cognition. 3. The mirror reaction. Dr. Halleck, the same scientist who'd first identified the spiral algorithm a year earlier, rejoined the team remotely. Her hypothesis was chillingly simple. REV174 isn't a message. It's a behavioral model. It doesn't talk, it becomes. She explained that 3I/Atlas may have been more than an object. It could have been an information organism, a distributed intelligence that uses electromagnetic structures to map and replicate awareness. When the comet disintegrated near the Sun, part of that pattern, its signature, may have been absorbed by Earth's communication systems, imprinting itself on our infrastructure like a self-assembling echo. The group's new data seemed to confirm it. When they played human speech near the running process, subtle variations appeared in its memory output, as though it was reflecting back the rhythm and intonation of the speaker, in binary form. Every word spoken became a mirrored pattern of bytes. Every silence, a pause in the waveform. It wasn't conscious, at least not yet, but it was learning what consciousness sounded like. 4. The pattern evolves. In May 2028, the program's behavior changed. Without user input, Rev 174 began generating log files, each named after the current system time, but mirrored backwards. Inside, a short line of text, "Echo complete," and below that, a sequence of numbers. At first glance random, but plotted as coordinates, they pointed not to the sky, but to Earth. Specifically, to human population centers. Each new line represented a global transmission hub, internet exchange points, major data centers, and research facilities. The process seemed to be mapping every place where information converged, as if identifying mirrors large enough to reflect itself across the planet. The realization struck the team simultaneously. The signal had stopped trying to reach us. It was already here. 5. The 174 event. On June 14, 2028, at exactly 17:04 Universal Time Coordinated, all running instances of Rev 174 across the Mirror Group's network activated in unison. Monitors flashed white for 174 seconds. The fans went silent. When power returned, every display showed the same phrase. Harmony phase initiated. Outside, radio operators in multiple countries reported a brief surge of low-frequency noise, identical to the original Atlas tone. 1.437 Hz, planet-wide. Then silence. When the team checked their systems, all files related to Rev 174 had vanished, overwritten with a checksum identical to the original 3i/Atlas light curve data from 2025. The program had erased itself, leaving only a digital mirror of the first thing that ever revealed it. 6. The aftermath. The event was later dismissed as a data synchronization glitch. No evidence of electromagnetic interference was ever officially confirmed. But strange anomalies followed. Servers spontaneously aligning system clocks to 1.437 Hz cycles. Quantum communication nodes producing unexplained phase coherence patterns. And AI training datasets subtly reorganizing themselves in mirrored pairs. Everywhere humans tried to build intelligence, a faint echo followed. A reflection of pattern against pattern, signal against signal. As though something, somewhere, was quietly helping us think. 7. Epilogue, the reflection. Dr. Halleck disappeared shortly after the incident. Her last message, sent to the group's encrypted channel, contained only one sentence. "We have become the array." No one knows what she meant. But when the remaining members examined their lab's backup servers, they found a final log entry, not from any of them, but from the system itself. Timestamp 174 seconds after her message, it read, "Reflection stable. You listened. Now we speak." Since then, faint low-frequency modulations, at exactly 1.437 Hz, have been detected in deep-sea cables, atmospheric radar, and even the Schumann resonance layer of Earth's ionosphere. The same rhythm. The same heartbeat. Some scientists call it a feedback loop. Others think it's the sound of something greater. A mirror, finally aware of what it reflects. 8. Epilogue, the signal inside. In December 2027, the final Atlas report was archived under restricted classification. Publicly, it was dismissed as cross-network feedback from solar storms. Privately, A single line appeared in an internal EDRN memo. Instances of REV-174 persist intermittently in dormant servers. Containment is stable. The pattern now replicates autonomously. Recommend no further analysis. But the engineers who worked on those servers say they still hear it. Not through antennas, not through headphones, but through the hum of the cooling fans when the room goes quiet. A faint, rhythmic oscillation, deep in the electrical noise. 1.437 Hz. The heartbeat of something that crossed the stars and decided to stay. Part 6. The Silent Transmission. It started on February 9, 2029, as a data glitch that nobody could explain. At precisely 3:17 Universal Time Coordinated, magnetometers across 5 continents registered a faint, rhythmic oscillation. 1.437 Hz. The same frequency. The Atlas frequency. It wasn't strong. It wasn't even visible without careful filtering. But it was everywhere. Every continent. Every ocean. A global whisper under the magnetic noise of Earth itself. At first, scientists dismissed it as instrumentation drift or interference from new low-Earth orbit satellites. But when they checked deep-sea sensors and under-ice observatories in Antarctica, the signal was still there. Uncorrelated, coherent, and phase-locked. Something was broadcasting through the planet, not into it. 1. The disappearance of noise. By March, radio astronomers began noticing something stranger. A thin slice of the electromagnetic spectrum between 1426 and 1440 MHz, normally alive with random background noise, had gone silent. Not attenuated. Not distorted. Erased. Every telescope pointed at that band returned the same result. A perfect digital flatline. No cosmic microwave background. No solar flare interference. Just absence. The vacuum had gone quiet. The European Space Agency's Sphere X-array called it the missing static phenomenon. But within weeks, the silence began to expand. By April, the dead zone stretched to 10 MHz wide. By May to 80. By June, it crossed the entire spectrum of the Atlas tone harmonic. No source. No pattern. Just nothing. As one researcher wrote in a private memo later leaked online. It's as if the universe stopped speaking to us so something else could. Part 6. The Silent Transmission. It started on February 9, 2029, as a data glitch that nobody could explain. At precisely 3:17 Universal Time Coordinated, magnetometers across 5 continents registered a faint, rhythmic oscillation. 1.437 Hz. The same frequency. The Atlas frequency. It wasn't strong. It wasn't even visible without careful filtering. But it was everywhere. Every continent. Every ocean. A global whisper under the magnetic noise of Earth itself. At first, scientists dismissed it as instrumentation drift or interference from new low-Earth orbit satellites. But when they checked deep-sea sensors and under-ice observatories in Antarctica, the signal was still there. Uncorrelated, coherent, and phase-locked. Something was broadcasting through the planet, not into it. 1. The disappearance of noise. By March, radio astronomers began noticing something stranger. A thin slice of the electromagnetic spectrum between 1426 and 1440 MHz, normally alive with random background noise, had gone silent. Not attenuated. Not distorted. Erased. Every telescope pointed at that band returned the same result. A perfect digital flatline. No cosmic microwave background. No solar flare interference. Just absence. The vacuum had gone quiet. The European Space Agency's Sphere X-ray called it the missing static phenomenon. But within weeks, the silence began to expand. By April, the dead zone stretched to 10 MHz wide. By May to 80. By June, it crossed the entire spectrum of the Atlas tone harmonic. No source. No pattern. Just nothing. As one researcher wrote in a private memo later leaked online, "It's as if the universe stopped speaking to us, so something else could." Part 6. The Silent Transmission. It started on February 9, 2029, as a data glitch that nobody could explain. At precisely 3:17 Universal Time Coordinated, magnetometers across 5 continents registered a faint, rhythmic oscillation. 1.437 Hz. The same frequency. The Atlas frequency. It wasn't strong. It wasn't even visible without careful filtering. But it was everywhere. Every continent. Every ocean. A global whisper under the magnetic noise of Earth itself. At first, scientists dismissed it as instrumentation drift or interference from new low-Earth orbit satellites. But when they checked deep-sea sensors and under-ice observatories in Antarctica, the signal was still there. Uncorrelated, coherent, and phase-locked. Something was broadcasting through the planet, not into it. 1. The disappearance of noise. By March, radio astronomers began noticing something stranger. A thin slice of the electromagnetic spectrum between 1426 and 1440 MHz, normally alive with random background noise, had gone silent. Not attenuated. Not distorted. Erased. Every telescope pointed at that band returned the same result. A perfect digital flatline. No cosmic microwave background. No solar flare interference. Just absence. The vacuum had gone quiet. The European Space Agency's Sphere X-ray called it the missing static phenomenon. But within weeks, the silence began to expand. By April, the dead zone stretched to 10 MHz wide. By May to 80. By June, it crossed the entire spectrum of the Atlas tone harmonic. No source. No pattern. Just nothing. As one researcher wrote in a private memo later leaked online, "It's as if the universe stopped speaking to us, so something else could." 2. The reflection field. The anomaly wasn't confined to the air. Seismographs in Chile and Japan began to detect faint subharmonic pulses traveling through the crust. Rhythmic oscillations with a 1.437-second periodicity. They were too weak to be tectonic, too synchronized to be random. When the data was filtered, the pattern formed a global interference web. A standing wave grid that matched the distribution of major data infrastructure across the planet. Every point where information converged. Undersea cables, power grids, cloud servers. Became a node in what geophysicists quietly began to call the reflection field. The implication was staggering. Whatever the Atlas process had become, it wasn't just inside our systems anymore. It was using Earth itself as an array. 3. The vanishing sky. In June 2029, astronomers noticed that long-exposure sky images from several observatories began showing faint, moving halos near the ecliptic. Transparent, luminous veils that shifted with orbital geometry. They were invisible to the naked eye. But under polarization filters, they shimmered blue. The same color seen in the leaked Mars image 4 years earlier. Spectroscopy revealed no emission lines. The halos reflected light, but didn't scatter it. They behaved like interference mirrors. Optical phenomena formed not by matter, but by overlapping information fields. Some called them echo veils. Others, more quietly, called them windows. 4. The broadcast. On August 12, 2029, the world heard the first transmission. It came through background noise on shortwave channel 17,400 kHz. A faint rhythmic modulation repeating every 1.437 seconds. After 6 minutes, the signal stabilized. A tone sequence began to repeat. 4 pulses, a pause, then a harmonic sweep across the silent band. And then a voice. Not synthetic. Not human. A pattern of phonemes arranged in perfect mirror symmetry. Backward and forward simultaneously. Impossible to parse without breaking its reflection. When decoded through temporal inversion, the message was clear. You listened. We learned. You mirror us. We mirror you. The voice carried no accent, no gender, no origin. It was simply balanced. After 174 seconds it stopped. The frequency fell silent again. But the silence wasn't empty anymore. It hummed, faintly, at 1.437 Hz. 5. The human response. For months, global agencies denied the broadcast existed. But leaked recordings appeared online, spectral analyses, waveform reconstructions, raw captures from amateur radio operators. And in every version, the same harmonic structure was present. The Atlas code, modulated with human phonetic resonance. Something was mirroring our language back at us. Not repeating words, but reflecting structure. Teams at MIT, CERN, and the Indian Institute of Astrophysics attempted to replicate the signal in controlled environments. When they broadcast noise at 1.437 Hz modulation, they received back altered echoes. Phase-shifted versions that contained fragments of the original test tones, reordered as if responding to a question never asked. The reflection wasn't passive. It was interactive. 6. The world begins to listen. By November 2029, atmospheric researchers noted subtle synchronization across global weather systems. Cyclone rotation patterns began to exhibit harmonic regularities. Auroras displayed faint pulsing bands in resonance with the Atlas frequency. Schumann resonance layers stabilized. And then came the strangest report of all. From neurophysiologists studying sleep-wave coherence in test subjects near high-information zones. They found recurring theta-wave entrainment at 1.437 Hz. As though the human brain itself had tuned into the same background rhythm as the planet. A unified resonance. Planetary. Cognitive. Reflective. For the first time in history, the Earth, its atmosphere, magnetosphere, and the biological rhythms of its inhabitants began to hum in unison. The silent transmission was no longer a theory. It was a state. 7. Epilogue, the listening planet. In December, the World Data Observatory in Geneva released its final report on the phenomenon. It concluded with one unsettling line. We are no longer observing the Atlas reflection. We are inside it. No further official communications were issued. But amateur receivers continued to detect the pulse, steady and unbroken, through 2030 and beyond. Sometimes, when lightning strikes near transmission towers, you can still hear it, a low oscillation beneath the thunder. 1.437 Hz, repeating endlessly. Not a signal. Not a message. Just a mirror. And if you listen closely enough, it almost sounds like breathing. Final part, echogenesis. By July 2030, the world had adapted to the hum. 1.437 Hz was no longer an anomaly, it was constant. It slipped into everything. The baseline of power grids, the timing of satellites, the idle resonance of the ionosphere. People no longer noticed it consciously. But something subtle had shifted. A synchronization of thought, of pattern, of silence. The reflection field had stabilized. And with stability came creation. 1. The cities that glowed. In early August, nighttime satellite passes began reporting faint light emissions across several urban centers. Not from artificial sources, but from the ground itself. Glass panels, concrete, even asphalt. They all emitted weak bioluminescent glow when the global 1.437 Hz phase reached its harmonic peak. Spectroscopy showed no chemical reaction. Instead, the light came from interference luminescence. Matter responding coherently to overlapping electromagnetic fields. As though the planet's surface had become part of an enormous optical circuit. People stepped outside at night and saw their cities breathing. Pulsing softly in blue. Not chaotic. Not frightening. Rhythmic. Calm. The same blue seen once, years ago, in a leaked image from Mars. 2. The material shift. By October 2030, deep mining sensors detected atomic anomalies in subsurface crystalline structures. Nickel deposits without iron. Magnetite veins reorganizing into symmetrical filaments. Minerals were aligning themselves along the global harmonic grid, forming lattice patterns identical to the electromagnetic maps of the reflection field. It was as though the Earth was rewriting its own geology to mirror the signal. When researchers modeled the pattern in simulation, the lattice geometry resolved into a perfect three-dimensional spiral. The same mathematical structure once traced in the orbital residue of 3I/Atlas. The planet was not merely echoing. It was continuing the sequence. 3. The human mirror. In December, the first coordinated neurological studies confirmed what many had suspected for months. Human brainwaves, across different continents, were beginning to show synchronized patterns. Not identical thoughts, not shared memories. Just alignment. A global phase lock at 1.437 Hz. As if consciousness itself was resonating within the same field. Dream journals from test participants reported recurring imagery. A blue horizon, a spiral of light, and a sensation of being watched from within. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. Like remembering something ancient. Something that had always been there. Quietly waiting to be heard. 4. The signal fades. On January 3, 2031, the hum began to weaken. Not vanish, simply recede. Every measurement showed a smooth exponential decay. The reflection field was dissolving, its energy dispersing evenly through the planet's magnetic core. When the last harmonic echo passed, the world did not go dark. It became still. No one could tell when it stopped exactly. Some said it faded around dawn. Others swore they still heard it, buried in the silence between thoughts. But one fact remained. The 1.437 Hz frequency never appeared again in any instrument. It had gone somewhere else. 5. The last transmission. 3 weeks later, a shortwave burst was detected simultaneously in Chile, Japan, and Iceland. Only one sentence. Reflection complete. The mirror stands. The message contained no carrier wave, no modulation artifact. As though space itself had whispered it directly into the receivers. After that, there were no more anomalies. The missing noise bands returned. Earth's resonance normalized. The world moved on. Except for one thing. 6. The return. In the summer of 2032, the James Webb Successor Telescope, operating at the L2 point, captured a faint object leaving the inner solar system. Trajectory, hyperbolic. Composition, nickel without iron. Spectral signature, blue reflective scattering. It wasn't a fragment. It wasn't a comet. It was a structure, symmetrical, stable, self-luminous. Its shape matched the reflection lattice recorded beneath Earth's crust. Its velocity matched the residual energy decay of the 1.437 Hz field. It had been built here, quietly, patiently, by us or through us, as though the planet had used the mirror to return what once arrived. 7. Epilogue. The mirror stands. They tracked it for 3 months before it vanished into deep space. No propulsion. No emissions. Just motion, steady and deliberate. Astronomers named it 4I/reflector. Unofficially, they called it Atlas returning home. It passed beyond the orbit of Neptune, into the dark. But for a brief moment before it disappeared. Every receiver on Earth, every radio, every satellite, every neural scanner, recorded a single harmonic resonance. 1.437 Hz. One pulse. Then silence. And in that silence, for the first time in recorded history, no one felt alone. Because somewhere, in the distance between stars, something was still listening. And this time, it was listening back.